On January 8th, 2016, his 69th birthday, David Bowie released his 28th record, Blackstar. Its quality was clear. He put forth a commanding set of mystifying experimental songs that ranked among some of the strongest of his career. The lyrical content in particular drew comparison to some of the magic he captivated listeners with in the 1970s. Lyrics with the sort of wit and wisdom that could invent characters and the worlds around them, which Bowie subsequently became, living with and alongside. With a voice so bold, Bowie sang his lyrics with a precise sort of ambiguity that left listeners wanting more, and which also left plenty of canvas for the brilliant musicians in his employ upon which to explode. Immediately, critics praised the album. Rolling Stone published the first review a few weeks before the release. 4 stars out of 5 they gave it, calling it an anti-pop masterpiece, aggressively experimental, and Bowie's most fulfilling since 1977's Low. The Guardian chimed in, another 4 stars, praising its forward-looking vision, observing that Bowie had always made his best music while looking ahead. Pitchfork named it Best New Music and gave it an 8.5 rating. They said, David Bowie has died many deaths, yet he is still with us. He is popular music's ultimate Lazarus. On I Can't Give Everything Away, he once again sounds like a frustrated Lazarus, stymied by a returning pulse. This tortured immortality is no gimmick. Bowie will live on long after the man has died. For now, though, he's making the most of his latest reawakening, adding to the myth while the myth is his to hold. Yet, just 2 days later, news broke that shocked the world. David Bowie, dead at 69. A private 18-month battle with cancer had taken his life, and quickly the public's understanding of his final work began to transform. The reviews turned to obituaries, and listeners began to pore over the lyrics to decode his last words. What was thought to be a late career experiment, a new challenge, suddenly became a coded farewell letter. Bowie had long wanted to make a jazz record, a vision that his longtime friend, producer, and collaborator Tony Visconti shared. The issue, they felt, was that they were always surrounded by a cast of rock musicians, and to ask their rock friends to play jazz would simply not satisfy. In preparation for a new direction, Bowie began scoping out jazz clubs in Greenwich Village, eventually discovering saxophonist Donnie McCaslin and his quartet at 5-5 Bar. Donnie had been tipped off that someone important may be in the crowd, though he did not know who. For a moment, he spotted Bowie sitting in the back of the club. The quartet were absolutely on fire that night. Captivated and caught off guard by the unexpected electric aggression, Bowie soon reached out and asked if the band would like to work with him. Ever the explorers of the cutting edge, Bowie and Visconti were in the midst of taking great inspiration from music's contemporary trailblazers, namely Kendrick Lamar and D'Angelo. Over the past year, Lamar's meteoric rise to hip-hop stardom had seen him take a creative left turn with the release of To Pimp a Butterfly. An instant classic, Lamar had blended his usual hip-hop sound with free and experimental jazz, soul, and funk. Likewise, D'Angelo's progressive soul masterpiece Black Messiah dropped just before the recording of Blackstar. The groove and emotion present in these two pieces informed a lot of the early concept of Bowie's next record. When Bowie and Visconti got into the studio with McCaslin and his quartet, they quickly found the sound they were looking for, owing to the fact that these jazz maestros were among the most technically proficient they had ever worked with. The mandate was to create a jazz album, with the expectation that it would still contain rock elements. They found the jazz players were easily able to adapt to their styles and the different needs of the tracks. The mood was collaborative and free, and in the space of a week in January 2015, and in complete secrecy, a majority of the album's recording sessions took place. Non-disclosure agreements were signed to keep the project under wraps, but similarly concealed was Bowie's medical condition. Through his 18-month battle, Bowie's condition initially improved, with his liver cancer going into remission. It was during this period, and while receiving chemotherapy, that a majority of the work on the album took place. Sadly, as 2015 came to a close, Bowie's health had declined sharply. The cancer had returned, and his diagnosis became terminal. Bowie prepared himself and his work for the end. Of Blackstar, Tony Visconti said, "He made Blackstar for us, his parting gift. I knew for a year this was the way it would be. I wasn't, however, prepared for it." The final work Bowie did for the record was shooting a video for one of the key tracks, Lazarus. A 10-minute short film, directed by Johan Renck, was released the day before the album on the 7th of January 2016. It was a poignant artistic statement on his terminal condition, as Bowie is featured singing from his deathbed. Ironically, Renck had no idea of Bowie's cancer diagnosis reaching a terminal stage, and his suggestion of shots, including the hospital bed and Bowie fading back into the closet, served to add mythos to his subsequent death, a creative decision that Bowie was eager to explore. Renek described the experience as touching the sun, and that nothing could be as formidable and fulfilling as working with such a legend. Blackstar feels like one of the most meticulously crafted, intentional artistic statements ever made, and not just only because of the extraordinary circumstances and the brilliant music. Under the surface, there were even more hidden messages and parting gifts. Months after its release, fans began to discover a phenomenon in the packaging of the LP. When exposed to sunlight, a star field would appear, and a portrait of Bowie amongst the stars became visible. When exposed to a black light, it glowed a luminous blue. Fans began to craft theories that will be debated forever. The font on the album's back cover was called Terminal, coming from a design suite called Lazarus. It could have been a coincidence, but it could be an equally deep hidden message that Bowie left to keep Mystique going forever. I choose to believe the latter, knowing that Bowie would certainly want us to keep questioning. Today is January 10th, 2026, and it marks 10 years since Bowie's passing. And for many devoted fans, they've found the album's material understandably too heavy to revisit. As it collected awards and accolades at the year's end, it was placed on the mantle with some of Bowie's greatest works, and gave us a beautiful ending in only a way that he could. In preparing this reflection, I listened to Blackstar for the first time in years, and I found that it's just as fresh today as when it first came out. A real testament to his ability and commitment to be a progressive artist at every stage of his career. Somewhere out there, there's a starman waiting in the sky, and he knows he's blown our minds. Thanks for watching. This video was adapted from a post I made on Substack. I'll leave the link to that and my Instagram and TikTok below, where I make short form content that you may enjoy as well if you like hearing about music legends and the stories behind the music. Thanks for watching.